So you are going to send it to me in Discord.
Yeah, I sent you the chat link.
Yeah, I don't want to.
And I just went live too, so we're live now. So any of those.
Back to the chat link without dropping the call.
And that'll also show like the. Oh, you just left. Cool. Well, for now, it's just me. So, as people are coming in, great. Good to see you. We'll see who all comes in. We got one viewer. That's probably Michael. All right. Come on in. The water's fine. Doot, doot. Doot, 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 doot. Oh, neat. Learning new things every day. Super fun. Sarah, where'd you go? We're waiting on Sarah. She's on her way. I promise. She went to switch computers. But she will be back. So if you have questions for me, questions for Sarah, let me know in the chat. Nice. Good to see you, John. Lumi. No, that was an old. Oh, I see. Yeah. To switch. Yeah, I ended up having to push everybody back a week, basically. So we had, I had a bunch of illness, and in that point, we had a scheduling issue, and so I just shoved everybody back. So, Lumi, I think you're next week, right? Hey, Sutton Road, how's it going, man? Good to see you. There she is. Hey, Sarah.
Okay.
Doing very well. Doing well. That's nice to see that the notifications worked for you, John. That answers a question of mine, because I also forgot to look into it. So Sarah is joining us today. We haven't kicked off the show yet, but we will. And so we're just working on getting some shares out there, getting some links out there. So if you're listening in and want to hit the like button or hit the share button, that would help out immensely. And of course, we'll be restreaming this on podcasts. So Apple Podcast and Spotify Podcast. Still working on Google. And I say working on Google. I just haven't had time to get that one up and running. But we will. We will. We will. We will. All right. Let's find our... Yeah, we can just go. We can just get started with club business.
Who is that?
Let's see. That's John. Let's see. I'm gonna actually drop this in our club's general discussion.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the link so I can share it. Can you see me okay? Is the angle?
You're kind of at the bottom of the screen.
Interesting.
It's if you're looking at the mobile one, you're going to show up in the middle, but the desktop view, you're kind of at the bottom. There we go. That's good. Oh, appreciate that, John. Love it. So if you have any... Yeah, Nancy, welcome in. This is the MCAS meeting. Appreciate you coming in. Yeah, share out the links here, both on we're streaming on YouTube right now. We're streaming on TikTok. If you have any questions for Sarah, doesn't matter how embarrassing, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll get to them. We will force her to answer them. I guess you can always plead the fifth, regardless of what we ask. If you haven't met Sarah before, Sarah is very much a killifish addict. And so any killifish questions you have, drop them in there. We'll try to get through them. But this is like previous weeks. This is mostly about who is Sarah, right? What has she gone through? What has her experiences been? Like how, how did she do this? How did she get here? How did she find herself here?
Awesome. Sorry, I'm trying to get logged into Discord so that I can participate, but it's not cooperating.
Oh, I just posted it in our general chat.
I can't see
that
it,
might be where
so-
Nancy saw it, but maybe Nancy's subscribed. I don't know.
Well, Nancy should share it on Facebook because Sarah can't.
Yeah, get it over there, Sarah. Not Sarah. Get it over there, Nancy. It's all right. We'll scrap this part. It's totally fine. Failure is always an option.
Oh wait, I might be able to switch it. Okay, I will be right back. I'm so sorry, guys.
All right. While Sarah's out, I have something new and exciting. Oh, she's coming back in. All right, she can come back in. You've got a lot of the room noise again.
Let me fix that.
So this is new. This is perfect. This is new from AquaFindr. So this is the AquaFindr forum. If you go to AquaFindr, there's a link for it at the top or in the mobile navigation bar. Trying to start to build this community out. It's slow right now because we just launched yesterday. But pop in over there. I've kind of preceded a couple topics to try to jumpstart things. But I'm really hoping that kind of becomes the community side of AquaFindr. So that'll be good. So definitely get in there, ask questions, answer questions, start building prestige. Sarah, do you have audio yet? I don't hear you. I think you're muted.
Oh, yeah, I was just muted. Is that better?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
That seems a lot better.
Okay, good.
Awesome.
We're ready.
We're ready. We're ready, everyone. All right. Let's see here. Yeah, continue to share that out. And let's get some more folks in here as we go. You have questions, drop them into the chat. If you don't have questions, just listen along. I'm going to go ahead and put Sarah back in the waiting room and then bring her back in just a moment. All right. Let's get this show started. All right. Welcome in, everyone. Welcome to Weekly Water Change by AquaFindr, the platform that makes buying and selling fish online safe and secure. This is the show where we talk with real people behind the aquarium hobby, the breeders, the sellers, the hobbyists who live and breathe aquariums, and we're going to siphon off some learnings along the way. Apologies for that pun, but I think it's going to stay. Today's guest is Sarah Walker. Sarah has literally been all over the world doing fish stuff, which we'll be getting into, and there's learnings and fun and disasters along the way. Hey, Sarah, thanks for being here. How's it going?
Hey, Greg, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Appreciate you finding the time in your busy, crazy schedule to come on and talk with us a little bit here. I just kind of want to go back to the beginning. You and I have somewhat of a rapport. All cards on the table. Sarah is on the board of our local Music City Aquarium Society, our local fish club. She's amazing. She basically runs the thing now that Tanner left us. And hopefully he's listening to this and hear just how much shade I mean behind that phrase. I want to go all the way back to the beginning of Sarah getting into this the aquarium hobby. Like, what brought you into this space? What kind of hooked you?
Well, so what hooked me was I was a broke kid growing up, and you know how we have those scholastic book fairs in middle school, and everything is so expensive, and I only had like $10, and all I could afford was this little packet of triops, which are like brine shrimp but giant. They're like baby horseshoe crabs, and
Oh,
I didn't have.
I've seen those. I may need to get some of those.
Oh my gosh, I hold on, we'll get to it. But I
Okay.
loved these things, and I didn't have soil. All I had was like, I think it was a container for sugar or something. Like it was just a garbage container, and I didn't have a heater, so I had them under a desk lamp, and I raised like 3 generations using paper towels because I didn't have gravel. And I don't know why it didn't occur to 12-year-old Sarah to go get some dirt from outside, but I just used paper towels, and I would put them in little wads and hide them in the back of the freezer so my parents wouldn't know that that's how I was incubating the eggs. And then I went to governor's school, and my mom murdered all of them and then found them in the freezer and threw them away. So that was a tragic end to the story, but that kind of got me. But it got me hooked into this annualism, right? It's that idea that like I could literally take a dirty, nasty paper towel, put it in my freezer for 30 days, and then hatch out more triops. Like that blew my mind, and that kind of has kept blowing my mind every day for the rest of my life, really.
That's crazy. How big do triops get?
Size of a nickel.
Initially?
The ones I saw in the wild were probably closer to a quarter, but the ones I've raised in
Right.
captivity have never been bigger than. They eat so much food. They eat like a ridiculous, like 10 times their body weight. It's stupid. You can't keep up with them.
And they're basically prehistoric, right? Like they're
Right.
okay.
They're,
I may
they're
need
like
to
berry
get in
shrimp
on
or brine shrimp. When I lived in
But they're
Arizona,
huge.
my very first collecting trip was in Arizona. They have monsoons, and so the rain will come, and the rain would come for like one day, and then we would count 2 weeks, and then the closest weekend to that, we would drive up to Payson, and what we would do, because it's a BLM national forest, and so unlike here, there are no roads. So you just literally pull your car off and drive around the forest. You do not have to hike. You can just drive your Subaru in the woods, and that's what we did. And we looked for puddles, and eventually we found freaking puddles with triops in them. And so I raised a couple more generations in Phoenix, but it's impossible. It's just they require such extreme environment that I haven't done it often in here in Tennessee because it's a full-time job, I think.
Man, that's mind-boggling to me that you can just like it's basically a small horseshoe crab, right? Like that you're just walking in the woods looking in puddles and you're finding these like prehistoric invertebrates.
Yep,
So-
you got to wait 2 weeks after the water comes, and then the rest of the year you wouldn't even know they were there because it's a road. Like where we ended up finding it was a puddle through a road. Like we drove through the triops and was like, why don't we check this one? And that's where they were. So like literally they were living in the street, and when it rained, there was fish.
What state was that again?
Arizona. It was in Flagstaff.
Okay, man.
I don't think we found them in Payson, but we did find them in Flagstaff.
That's amazing. I love every bit of that. Wow. Okay, so you mentioned something that I wanted to call out, which was the annual aspect of triops, and that's one of the things that hooked you. Can you talk a little bit more about that and kind of bring us into your current like money drain hobby?
Well, killifish hooked me again. So let's fast forward 10 years. I've moved to Phoenix, and I picked up a $10 fish tank on Craigslist, and someone said, hey, you know, there's a fish club in Phoenix. And I'm like, what's a fish club? And they're like, girl, they even have this big convention and they give you free pizza. And I'm like, okay, free pizza, I'm down. And so it was a 1 day. Well, they had the club that we know now, there was all of that. But what I went to first was this thing called Saki, which is the Southwest Aquarium Keepers event. And it's run by the Killifish Club in Phoenix. We've sent fish, MCAS has sent fish a few times for their auction. And we come in and we sign up and we're just like, Tara's like, hi, who are you? And I'm just like, well, my name's Sarah and I have a balloon molly. And she's like, that's nice. And so I sign up and I notice there's a shoebox that's got wet dirt in it. And I don't think nothing of it. I've never, I don't know anything. So we go on, I get my free pizza and my belly's full. And then Shane Estuary stands up there with that box and he says, have y'all seen my babies? And in the 4 hours I had been there, it went from a bucket of water to 100 baby Nothobrachius minias. And then he sold those babies 6 minutes later. And I was just like mind boggled. I'm just like, what? Like triops I can understand. Those are fairy shrimp. Those are brine shrimp. They're just a different version of that. But real fish are coming out of dirt. I was hooked. And so I left with 3 pairs of fish, none of the manuals, thankfully, because they're really hard. But I left with 3 pairs of killifish. And then within a year, I had 100 fish tanks. It just went completely out of control.
So how?
And I've not stopped, obviously.
Right. We can see the rack behind you. How many of those tanks are killies?
All of them?
Okay.
No, that's not true. Hawaiian shrimp, aquatic isopods, everything else is killies. So maybe 2 of them aren't.
So from a gotta catch 'em all sense, right? Like how many? You may not even know offhand. Well, but you probably do. How many like species of like realistically in the aquarium hobby, like how many different species of killifish could you keep?
200 or 300. There's 18. There's almost 2,000 species that are listed. And like the great thing about killies is you don't need a lot of them. Like I'm not a biologist, but there's a gene that like triggers inbreeding, right? So like when we get our genetic bottlenecks, it's because there's a genetic decay. And some of these annual killifish especially don't have that gene, or that gene has been turned off. And so because these are fish that live in a pond that might be the size of a pond you have with koi in your backyard, and their entire species live in that pond. And so in order for them not to die, they have to somehow get away from the bottleneck of genetics. And so, I mean, you could keep as many, there's just so many different types. There's no way to collect them all. That would be insane.
Do they crossbreed too, or are they all like independent like species?
So in my experience, I have never had them hybridize. Never, not in a single. And I'm pretty irresponsible. I throw them all together. That being said, there is some records of like very similar species. So like, for example, Fungilopanchex gardneri and Fungilopanchex nigeranus come from Cross River, Nigeria. And those are it's in the same watershed and they look very similar. And so like they can hybridize, but from what I've read, they don't produce fertile offspring. So hybridization is possible, but it doesn't proliferate.
Interesting. So, okay. So we're a few minutes in and we're already deep in the subject of killifish, which is perfect because I know that's basically all you ever want to talk about in a good way. So for folks that haven't done killifish, haven't really heard much about killifish, like just give us kind of the flyover view of this particular type of fish.
Well, killifish comes from the Dutch word meaning a puddle.
Oh, we're going all the way back to like etymology.
I mean, you said go. You said go back.
Let's do it.
Dutch word meaning puddle. And so when we think about most of the fish that come from our aquarium hobby, we think about things like plecos, we think about things like angelfish and cichlids. And a lot of those things are coming from fast moving rivers and water, right? You want to go catch a pleco, you got to like bear through it. You want to catch a killifish, they're in the reeds. Or they're not in the moving water at all. They're in the ponds and the shallows and the temporary pools of water outside that big moving body of water. So they're your minnows, they're your bait fish. And they exist pretty much all over the whole planet, except for in Asia. So like if you know of the betta fish, that is the same fish in a different, or same niche, but a different fish. So like they don't exist in Southeast Asia because betta fish were already there. They don't exist in Australia because we have rainbow fish and blue-eyed rainbows. You know, they're the exact same fish. They're just, or exact same niche. They're just being filled with a very similar fish. But everywhere else on the whole planet, it's full of killies.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating to me. So
And now you see why I get so crazy about it.
I can't imagine so there's annual killifish, and then there's perennial killifish too, right? Like you've got
right,
both
and
types,
there's
or are they
somewhere
all
in between. So the crazy thing about killies is it's very easy to talk about because we have so many of them in the hobby. However, this story isn't unique to just killies, just maybe the annualism story is. And so, you know, as killies developed and moved through, you know, I'm not going to make you go all the way back, but like once upon a time there was Pangea and all the land was together. And as the land moved apart, you can watch how evolution changes our families of fish. You can see this in cichlids, you can see this in killies. Killies is just it's a little bit more interesting story because on two separate continents, they developed annualism because in a response to living in an extreme environment. So like you don't have cichlids in Tanzania because it's a desert, but you have killifish because they have this crazy ability to adapt to all of these extreme environments. And that's just fascinating to me.
Okay, so now we're getting into it. So I want to talk about killifish so bad, but I also want to know like the things that have gone wrong in all of your stuff. So where do we go? Okay, let's talk just briefly the life cycle of annual killies. Like, how do you do that? And then I want you to just like calmly segue into a complete disaster.
All right, fair enough. So annual killies are fun because instead of collecting eggs in a mop or, you know, siphoning out eggs like with catfish, you pull them out in dirt and then you dry the dirt out and you let them sit around for a while. And then when you get ready, you add some water and bam, there's fish. It's in response.
That's part of their specialization. So you can have
Yep,
one
so
puddle of killifish.
It's called
right next to a different.
Yes, it's called diapause. So diapause means that the eggs are genetically programmed to pause and stop and not hatch until water is introduced. And not every time is it water introduced. So if I send you eggs, the first time you might get 10 babies. The second time you might get 100 babies. The fifth time you might get 100 babies because the eggs know not to hatch all at the same time. And so you have to constantly come back and rehatch eggs. You know, I hatch 3 times and then I give away my bags. And that way you have 2 more chances or 5 more chances, you know.
Oh, so the same little bit of dirt, same little bit of peat, you'll hatch, and then you just take
5
it back
times.
out, and then let it
and then you dry it out
and
again.
you do it again.
Absolutely.
That's crazy. All right, where have you gone wrong with killifish? What's an early memory of this?
The worst I ever went wrong, and it was early on, is I obviously started my fish keeping career in Phoenix, and it never gets below 62 degrees in the winter. And no matter how hot it is, I had an air conditioning that could keep up with it. And so I decided to move to Tennessee in September when it's still 80 degrees. And I thought I could make it through a winter without insulation in my fish room. So I sat here and watched all my fish freeze to death.
How long ago was that?
So that was when we first moved here in 2019. I sold most of my fish, but I moved 11 buckets and 2 coolers full of breather bag full of fish that I had. Like I had this room set up. There wasn't walls or nothing. I just put tanks in here because in Phoenix, that's all we did. And I thought, well, I'll just run a space heater. It doesn't get that cold in Tennessee, but I had desert brain. And desert brain doesn't remember what cold feels like. And so it took me 3 years to get a Plico to survive over winter in the fish room and probably $3,000 in insulation. So when you said, oh, she has a fish room outside her house. Oh, but she paid very dearly for it.
Yeah. Yeah, because you had this. Did you build the shed or did it come on the property or?
It's a 3,000 square foot barn. And so there's a bay on one side of the wall where the mechanic shop is, where JD has all his car crap. And then I have a wood room where I make my trophies on the other side. And neither of those are insulated either, but we share a concrete pad. So not only did I have to add insulation to the walls, I had to add insulation to the floor. And
Yeah.
so it was literally like learning to keep fish all over again. So like just today I was telling a friend of mine who keeps grindles, and I said, he's like, I wonder how we can scale this up. And I'm like, well, in Phoenix, I did it this way. I had an inch full of gravel and I kept water in the gravel and then dry pads on top of it. And it worked out great. The minute I did that in Tennessee, it was full of flies, full of mold, and it just failed immediately because there's a huge difference between 10% humidity and 75% humidity. So, like, in a lot of ways, it felt like completely relearning a new hobby. I had to change all the fish that I keep. So, like, for example, in Phoenix, all of our water has a natural TDS of like 500 on a good day. And on a bad day, the meter is maxed out. And so, like, that's salt water without salt in it. And so, like, fish that do well in the desert kept very well for me. Like, I could keep African cichlids. I had like 3 species of shellies. And like every shelly I've gotten here has failed to thrive because my water is 120 TDS at a pH of like 6.8 versus 8 pH and 700 TDS. And so all the fish that I've kept have changed. It's been very, have I ever heard of the 60s novelty toy Instant Fish by Whammo? Oh, I've seen pictures of those. I would love to get my hands on them. You can still buy instant fish on Temu, but I have to say that I'm not a lawyer, and if I was a lawyer, I would tell you very carefully not to do that. Unless,
Sounds right. So you have traveled all over the world doing fish stuff, primarily killifish stuff, I assume. And then when did you start traveling, and how did you kind of get into that?
well, my roommate is from Germany. She's lived with us for about 8 years, so she's family, and we wanted to visit her family. And she said, Sarah, what do you want to do in Germany? And if you don't know me, I really don't care about anything but my fish. And I'm like, well, there's no fish in Germany, but there are fish people in Germany. And Germany has one of the biggest killifish shows on the planet and one of the best hobbyists. And like they take their responsibility towards conservation very seriously in the species they maintain. And so there's a lot to learn from everybody in Germany because they don't do it the way that we do it. And so we went and visited the president of the DKG's fish room. And so I just waltzed in there like I wasn't anybody. I literally murdered my fish like 2 years ago. Like I got nothing. And so he gave me a wonderful tour and just really, spoke some love into me. And that kind of got me like, oh, going across, and I still get emails and I still have contacts just from visiting a few people in Germany once. And so when I had the opportunity to the opportunity to go to Uruguay wasn't on purpose. So one of the best parts about killifish is that rich white people have this great hobby called wildlife poaching. And so for years, we have gone mostly legally to other countries, caught 3 or 4 pairs of these killifish. And because we don't get this genetic bottleneck as often as we do in other fish, we can like literally keep a species for 20 years off of pairs of fish that are brought in without a commercial license from somebody's suitcase. And that's totally legal, right? Like you can go to Germany, bring a pair of angelfish home, and you don't need a commercial import license if you do something like that. And so that for years has been the way that these people take a vacation. And so started to go to the big conventions a few years after I got into it. And all these people have these crazy stories. And I'm looking at this old man in a walker and he's like, yeah, I was in the jungle of Colombia fighting narcos in the 80s. And I'm like, and then you just got on a plane and came home? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, how do I do this? And he's like, you just get on a plane. And I'm like, is this real? And he's like, yes. And it turns out that is 100% how you do it. And like everyone watches that snake video. I don't know if you've watched the new documentary on HBO about the reptile industry. Like on a much smaller scale, that is a totally legal and viable way to move animals around the country, right? Like if you're not coming home with 6 suitcases full of boas and you're coming home with 3 pairs of fish, there's a big difference in what you're doing. And so our hobby has been founded by citizen scientists. Like one of the guys I know, he gave a talk and he said, I saw this picture of a fish when I was a kid. So I got on a plane and I went looking for it. I didn't have a permit or nothing. And we're like, well, did you find it? And he said, it took 3 trips. And at the trip 3, he had a permit and a scientist, and he had all the pieces that you need to do a collecting trip. But like, he just loved the fish so much, he just said, "Screw it, I'm getting on a plane," and he
I'm gonna
did.
go get that
It was
fish.
amazing, right? And he went and found
Oh,
this fish and brought it into the hobby. Like, it's incredible. Like, you can just, and you could do that with any fish. It doesn't have to be a killifish, but because killifish are so resilient and they're just so hardy, we can do it. Because you know what? When I went to Uruguay, I brought home 15 species of fish, and I lost maybe 10% of them. I
hmm.
lost 90% of the cichlids. Most people lost 90% of the catfish, right? Like, there's a big difference in the survival rate of all the other species and the killifish.
And
Um,
killifish are just designed to be hardy
right. We,
and to
we
just
live in
deal with
these
it.
extreme environments.
They're
Exactly.
like the dandelions of fish, but they're beautiful.
Some of them are beautiful. Yes. Some of them are
Some
pretty ugly.
some of them are just gray or brown.
Right. Fundulus rathbunthi are my favorite because they are literally the ugliest ones I've ever seen. They're just like gray fish with some speckles on them. I'm like, what is this? I've got them in
These
my
guys are
pond. I
neat.
can't. Ugly gray fish.
So, so you had that first trip. Like, what was the first
Right.
trip
So
like? Just
anyway, so I find out that all these people are just literally like, especially if you live in Germany, they go down like 3 times a year. They just go to Africa, bring back fish. It's just their hobby. That's just what they do. And so I knew I had to be in that. How do you be in the room where it happens? Right? How do I get, there's only 6, if you have one SUV, there's only 6 seats. How do I get my butt in one of those chairs? So step 1 was build a fishy empire, because this shit's not cheap. And so I saved up about $5,000 in savings, that I had put away, because I knew I wanted to go to Africa. And what I wanted was the blue gularis, right? Like, those
Mhm.
are the king of the hobby. And like, at the time, there hadn't been a new import since I'd been in the hobby. And this was like 2022 when I decided that I wanted to go to Nigeria, and I started putting money back. And so I met friends on Facebook. I made contacts. I paid him to go out and survey. He found spots for me. I found a fishing guide who was able, I had all the pieces. I had security lined up. Like, the only thing I didn't have was a way to get the fish out, right? Short of me getting on a plane and going to get there. And I'm like, well, that's fine. I'll just pay my friend to get on a plane and bring them back. But then and then thanks to everything, they've denied his visa. And so I wasn't able to get the fish that way. And so then it became like, okay, Sarah, are you really just going to get on a plane and go visit a random dude you met on Facebook and hope that he doesn't kill you? And then I got a phone call to say that there was this legitimate fishing company in Uruguay. I'm like, I'm going to do that. So Nigeria sounds fun, but Sarah
Oh
does value
man.
her life. That would have been a great story, but it's not. I did get a phone call to go to Uruguay, and so that was a really big deal in itself in the killifish world, but not necessarily wasn't my dream to go to Uruguay. However, I'm so grateful and humbled that I was given that opportunity.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what was surprising to you going to your, like, this is something that you'd planned, you'd thought about, like, what was kind of the biggest difference between what you thought was going to happen and what actually did happen? Does anything come to mind?
Um, I just don't think I realized what a culture difference it is going from a more capitalist society into a democratic republic. Like, I heard from many people saying things like, well, if that's what we want, we'll just change it. We vote. That's what we do. They were the first country to legalize marijuana. They're
Hmm.
like, they didn't like the fact that people were using Uruguay as a tax haven. So, 6 months later, they changed it. And now the prices are much higher if you want to hide your money in Uruguay. And so people were just much happier, and their entire, you know, I tell people it was like seeing a first world country on a third world infrastructure, and people weren't complaining. Like, there
Hmm.
was no reason for them to go get a nice new car. Like, they were just happy living their life. Like, there wasn't that external pressure that we have. I'm sure there was, there's only one city in Uruguay. The rest are
Right.
all towns. So, maybe in Montevideo, there might have been a lot more of that. But, once we got out of the city, everyone was so nice. I just didn't expect how different it was. Like, the whole feeling is different when you're not in a city.
Yeah. That's that's so cool. When So when you leave the city and you're going, out into the wilds of Uruguay to pick fish out of puddles, like I'm
So let
imagining that all sorts of things can happen.
well, Uruguay. So the other difference is that this was a fish tour. So I'm going to Panama on a research expedition, and so those are going to be very different trips, right? So like
Mhm.
what I paid for with Maddie was a complete start to finish vacation for 10 days, I think. And he paid for my food, he paid for my stay, he was responsible for my transportation. All I had to do was show up with a net and say, let's go. He took care of everything else. And so really we just went on a road trip. And so like, for example, the very first fish we collected was Garcioluvius variatus. And variatus is the Spanish word for ditch. It's literally a ditch 1 foot away from the road. So like you might think we're going out in the nowhere. And I'm gonna show you a map and it's gonna say we're going out in the middle of nowhere, but we're just driving on dirt roads, pulling over, and then there are all the fish. Like we didn't have to do so like if you were to go on some of the other Uruguay tours that they do, like where you go catch the exotic catfish and the big old
Mhm.
gymnos, like yes, you do have to do night fishing, and yes, you do have to actually hike down into the valley to go get these fish. No, killifish live in stagnant ponds, and so we were just like one time we had to ask permission because the nigropenis were in someone's cow field on the other side of the fence. But most of the time we just collected between the fence and the road.
Huh.
So no different than driving around here, seeing a creek and saying, let's go get it, and then getting it out of the creek and keep going.
Yeah, the fish are in the easement.
Yep. Well, and what was interesting is like we were at areas that would have both, right? Because there's this big river, the Rio de Negro is coming down, and like it's like the Cumberland River. It's huge, and so when it is full, the river creates these temporary tributaries, which is where the apistos go and breed, and the tributaries are running to the stagnant ponds where the killifish live. So don't be confused. The apistos and the killifish might have been in the same 200-yard zone, but the apistos came with the river and the killifish remained. And
Oh,
so
okay.
we would literally find on one side of the road 3 species of killifish in the pond, period. And then walk on the other side where that temporary moving body of water was and find tetras and find catfish and find plecos. And those don't normally live there, but it's that's the nature of having a temporary water system is that the fish migrate and move, but the killifish always stayed.
Hmm.
That
Oh, so you've got like they're in a moving body of water, even if it's slow
yes.
moving, like the killifish are fairly easy to outcompete. But then in
Well,
the
no,
in
they
the
just don't go.
stagnant
The
water,
killifish don't go in the moving body. We found zero killifish in moving water.
they just won't be there.
No, they just don't go there.
That's
I found tetras in both water, but like I never found, and I might have sampled. We sampled 18 spots, right? So I obviously have not fished in all of the water, but in my experience, the killifish stayed. Now, one of the killifish, so we were not allowed to take home any of the predators. So Uruguay was very protective, and for good reason, of these endangered fish, right? And I say endangered, they're endangered species, not because there's not a million of them, but because all million live in one pond. So
yep.
therefore, they are always going to be an endangered species. And so Uruguay counted them in August before they released, or they counted them in July and released the permits and said, it's okay for you to come. And like this was the first time that they had released permits to a non-scientist ever. So the gentleman that did
Wow.
the tour for the last 25 years was able to get cichlid licenses, but they never let him take any annual killifish. And so why they gave him the license this year, we don't know, but we can only be grateful. Which is why it was so important that Sarah put her money where her mouth is and go on this tour, because if we didn't make it, maybe the government wouldn't give us, because this is ecotourism. And if we don't show that there's interest in these fish, the government may not protect them.
Hmm.
Right, we don't know what and while I was in Uruguay posting about them, people from Uruguay were seeing my stuff. Like people in general were very invested in this, and so there's a level of stewardship that's involved. But anyway, so they wouldn't let us take any predators because they said that's the apex of, you're not going to take my ecosystem out by taking out the apex predator. And so one of the ones that we didn't take back was a Mattiolivius wolferstaffi, and they are like chunky monkeys, and they're very cool. And
What a
what they
cool
were,
name.
Yeah, because they're like Wolferstaffi. Like also wolffish are from Uruguay. So like where do you think, so I actually think it's from a scientist with that name. But anyway, we'll just for this conversation, they're wolffish. I know, but they're an ambush predator. So like in that, when I was telling you, we would see places where the stagnant water was here and there's a road and like there's an easement underneath, right? And so like here's the killifish, here's the moving water. The Mattiolibius is right here watching the water come through,
Oh,
snagging them out as they try to come into that stagnant water. So they were embroaching on that moving water, but like as an ambush predator, you're not going to
yeah.
typically you don't see killifish in open water.
I'm learning so much. My brain is just churning. And you and I have talked about killies before, and you tried to suck me into into this addiction. Unsuccessful as of yet, but
Yeah, but did you know how cool they were?
the whole
And
annual
so
thing
here's the
really.
well, and here's the best part. Like these are fish that are designed to live in extreme environments. And while, my care is very close to a betta because bettas live in extreme environments. And so you see them being kept in tiny glass jars and they're thriving, right? Like the reason we don't keep bettas in 1 gallon jars isn't because of a lack of space. It's because most people don't do water changes. But you know what? I do water changes. My fish are healthy. The water is clean. And when the water is clean, you can literally, I'm hatching babies over there. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but they're just, there's probably 150 fish in that shoebox. And so you don't need to have a commercial fish room in order to raise a good stock of fish. You don't have to have $1 million in tools. Like for years, I didn't even have air running on half my tanks. They don't need it. That's just for me. I don't have lights on 2/3 of them. Like it's unnecessary. And my fish are thriving. They're breeding. I'm getting healthy babies. And so, the proof is in the pudding, but I just specify in fish that are as lazy as I am. Which
that
isn't true because they still get their water changes. That's the same amount of work no matter what fish you keep.
that might be the best sales pitch that you've done for me personally, trying to getting into killifish. It's like these fish are as lazy as you are. You just got
They are. They're very
gotta
happy
change
in
their
small
water.
containers.
They're fine.
And they need a lid because,
Oh,
in
they're
the
jumpers.
wild, they are jumpers, right? Their job is to jump from one puddle to the other. So people collecting in Colombia will tell you, if there's water on the ground and you can count 2 weeks, there's fish in it because the fish are designed to jump through, to jump from one puddle to the other.
Yeah, that's Aquarium Fantasy had mentioned that in the YouTube chat. That not only do they jump, but they can go a considerable distance.
Right.
Do
And
you
then you can
know?
pick them up off the floor and throw them back in the tank and they're just fine. I will caution you that if they get dog hair on them, it's not a good sign. But as long as you can keep the slime coat intact, you just pick them up and throw them back in. They're fine.
Yeah,
And like
I
I had our
occasionally will have like those like red eye Tetra wafers just like sitting on my carpet because they jump out and it's the middle of the night and they dry out and
you got to get them before they dry out. That's the key.
yeah, unless it's the eggs, in which case they're supposed to dry out and then
Right.
you just add water and you get fish again.
Right. Well, and the part that I love about it is, I'm going on this research expedition on Thanksgiving. And, I've been told that I need to prepare 50 to 60 tanks for the specimens I'm bringing back. Well, that's like my whole fish room. Like, what am I supposed to do here? And so, like, yes, I'm trying to build another fish room, but like we already talked about how much money and insulation that's going to cost. And
Yeah.
so, you know what I can do? Sell all my fish and put them in dirt. They'll be fine. I'll move those 60 gallons worth of Panama fish. And then when I'm ready, I'll just hatch more annuals. So I can literally keep 2 different sets of fish. Well, I mean, the Panama fish are not as easy. I can't just like put them in the suitcase and forget about them. But
You-
the annuals that came from Uruguay, I can literally completely have 0 living fish in my fish room and still have an entire 2 to 3 more generations sitting in a tub.
That is one way to take a break from the hobby. Just be like, this is, you have hobby boxes, right? When you give up a hobby, you put all the tools, all the paraphernalia in a box, and you just have like a box on your shelf that's labeled killifish. Just add water.
I do like hold on, I'll show you my box. It's kind of ridiculous. I need to get rid of some eggs. But this is my box of eggs. This isn't, 15 different species of killifish right in there in that Walmart
Just
tub.
hanging out.
Just hanging
Just
out.
hanging out.
Sometimes if it's like not too hot, I'll stick them outside because I read a research paper that showed that giving an extreme difference in temperature for eggs helps the development, because part of dealing with annuals is that you're going to get 100 fish to hatch. That doesn't mean you're going to get 100 babies or 100 adults. You might get 50 adults if you're good. I get 15 because I'm still learning. And so, to keep your fish healthy and to get a better survival rate, this paper said that if you introduce these extremes, you're going to get a better hatch rate, you're going to get a better incubation time. And back in the 80s and 90s, there was a gentleman named Herb Silva who owns a fish store in Uruguay. And he was a big proponent of sending eggs to the United States. And everyone said that his eggs would hatch so much better in the United States than they did in Uruguay because they sat in the belly of the plane and they had that extreme temperature difference. And I'm like, well, that makes sense if something is triggering the DNA by an extreme temperature fluctuation. So I'm very scientific in that I throw it outside, forget about it, bring it back in.
Right.
I don't let them sit in the sun, but I try to very unscientifically give them some variation.
I was just thinking we have to figure out a way to get more killifish on AquaFindr anyway. So you and I need to talk more about that. But
if you want to raise babies for me, I can give you babies all day long.
So annual, okay? Does that fish only live for a year?
So annual is more that name is more related to the cycle of water, right? So think about India. India has a very clear cycle of monsoons. It's dry as a bone, and then it is a very wet, soupy mess. And so that's why we call them annual killifish, because they come with the water. In the hobby, they're going to live for 2 years. I have killifish that are still alive that were adults that I brought back in September, right?
Okay.
But in the wild, they may have died because the water's going to go away. Right, because of the loss of habitat. Yep. But in the hobby, they live 2.5 years. That being said, they're very sensitive because you take a 1-year-old annual killifish and you throw him in a different tank with bad water, he's going to die immediately. Right. The recovery is much less forgiving. Right, because these are fragile fish because they're not evolved to live in anything other than one body of water their entire life. And so I have to be very careful when I have older fish moving them from tank to tank. They really didn't like that. But the ones that I didn't move survived the longest.
Because they were born and they grew out in a specific chemistry. They don't do really well with adjusting that chemistry.
When they get older, right, because the older they get, right, because they're going to be so big and their bodies aren't going to be as quick to react as a young tiny fish, right? I don't have any problems with the ones we distribute in the hobby, but we're talking about 18 months, 2 years in, they're going to be a little decrepit old. They don't want a new. They just want a water change and to be left alone.
I'm getting closer to this. I may need to get some killies from you because
as a fellow ADHDer, there are species of fish that have a much lower lifespan, right? There's Nothobrachus minimus is 6 weeks tops, and they're dead in 8 weeks. That's just who the fish are. They're that quick.
Do you just keep them in a colony, or do you still have to take the eggs out, dry them out, and put them back in?
Yeah, you still right. There's no colony breeding. You still have to go. Yep. And you also have to think if you have a fish that's going through that life cycle, think of how much food you're going to have to be giving them in order for them to grow at the speed they need to complete that life cycle. And, one of the other things I like about regular killifish, because typically before I went to Uruguay, I didn't mess around with annuals because they eat twice as much as the regular fish. They are so hungry. And I have giant 4-inch blue gularis and I feed them the same amount as my 2-inch annual killifish, right? They just eat a lot more than regular fish because their life cycle is so fast. They're burning on both ends.
But that does feel like the right fish for me though. Like,
I
because
mean, my
a year and a
ADHD and that
half, 2
fish.
years in, I'm like, I'm ready for something else.
Right. And then you
And
can just send your dirt off and be done with it.
just send the dirt out.
Yeah.
All right, we all have a few more. We only have a few more minutes. We can go a little bit long. That's fine. I want to hear. We've talked so much about killifish, which is fantastic. I want to hear another like disaster learning story from you before we, kind of wrap this up,
Another disaster.
or just another key. Oh, let's do it this way. What
All
is
my
a
disasters are weather related. They're all like one time the power went out and we didn't clean the carb on the generator. And so by the time and it was like freezing. It was the Houston freeze. And so it like went from like warm and flooding to immediately frozen. And so it was so hard to get the carb cleaned that by the time we got it cleaned and got the heater pulled up because it was brand new, we didn't know that the generator wasn't strong enough to power the heater. And so that was the second time I stood around and
oh
watched my fish freeze. That time I watched my fish freeze to death and I just closed the door and I didn't come back in for like 45 days. Like I was
oh geez.
done. And I was supposed to go fishing with Ken, which you guys have met if you're at the fish club, right? He's come and talked for us.
Mhm.
And I said, I'm sorry, Ken. I've decided I hate fish and I'm done. And he's like, what happened? And I told him, I said, I lost 100% of my fish because we had a power outage and everything I thought I had done to prepare was in fact not correct. And he said, well, Sarah, we're not going, you don't need to take any of these fish home. Just please come fishing with me. And I'm like, I can't, my heart, I don't want to see any more fish. And he would not leave me alone. And so I finally said yes. And we went down to Florida. And in case you didn't know, it worked. And so I got hooked again. Literally, I got hooked hooking fish. Because we had a terrible trip. The car got caught on fire and we had to turn around. And then the car that we were driving didn't have 4x4. So we were stuck in the sand. And so, like, normally we'll hit 7 to 10 spots in a weekend. We hit 3. And so, like, Ken was apologizing. And, like, we just had the absolute best time that, we reinvested, right? We
Yeah.
decided, okay, it's time to get some more fish.
All right.
But JD has still, like, those were JD's fish that froze. And he has still not gotten any more fish. Like he just won't take responsibility for him. He said, no, I'm not. I mean,
That's
we had
hard.
like 3 species of aspistos and like babies everywhere. I mean, and it was the spring, like we were almost clear of the winter.
Yep.
It was bull.
So to kind of round us out here, so if you were giving, if you're talking to a new fish keeper, somebody interested in getting into the hobby, like 2 things. What is your go-to piece of advice for them? And then what is kind of the opposite of that? Like, what is the thing that you just think we're getting wrong in the hobby that, we need to adjust?
Hmm. So I would say if you're a new person, the first thing I'm going to try to do is teach you about live foods. Because the thing that makes me successful over someone who maybe doesn't have 100 fish tanks is that I spend an hour every day working on my worms. I do not spend an hour every day on my fish tanks, but I absolutely spend an hour fish feeding them because the worms are so much more work. But if you can collect and take care of and have the consistency to do live foods, the rest of the success will follow. Promise.
I think we need to do a t-shirt that says I spend an hour a day just working on my worms.
I do. It's ridiculous. But I
So
feed probably 60% of these tanks every day from worms that I don't have to pay for.
that's pretty impressive. I will have you know, this is a little brag here, that I have a Daphnia colony now that's been alive since I got Daphnia from you 2 months ago.
Heck yeah.
So
They duplicate
there,
every 7 days. So that's like 6 weeks worth of generations. That's badass.
it's doing okay. So what about the other side of that? So what's something that's happening that is kind of common advice in the hobby that you're just like, no, don't do this?
I'm a really natural setup kind of girl. I keep glass boxes with water in them and I'm okay with that. And so I think that a lot of times we overwhelm new hobbyists that like you can't have a 75-gallon tank without without a filter or without a those underground those really expensive canister filters.
Oh yeah.
But I have a 75-gallon with gorgeous fish in it and all I have is an air stone in it. And so you're telling someone who may not have the opportunity to go spend $1,000 on all of this equipment that they shouldn't have a 75-gallon tank, when in fact, the problem is just understanding the chemistry of the tank and doing your chores. And you too can keep. Now I have maybe 8 fish in a 75-gallon tank. It's not free to not have a filter, but it is doable. And like, instead of teaching people that and having them understand the bioload and the whole like process of that, we are trying to compensate, I think, with equipment too many times without, it's not a substitute for knowledge.
That is fantastic advice. Like I agree with that wholeheartedly. That there's something about one, it's kind of experimenting, right? But it's growing slowly, it's paying attention, it's learning about the fish, it's learning about the water. It That's fantastic advice.
And it's learning about yourself. Because like, honestly, to do something like having all these tanks means that I have to commit to an hour a day. Because if it wasn't feeding my worms, it would be thawing out black worms and doing more water changes, right? I do less water changes because I feed live food. But if I was feeding frozen
Mm,
food, it wouldn't be less time. I would just have to do more water change to compensate for all the trash that I'm putting in there. And so like, just being able to teach people that it's an equation, it's not guesswork, um I think is where we fail, right? We just say, well, test your water and buy more filters or add more filter pads. Like, we don't address overfeeding as a problem, and we don't talk about real resources. Because if
mm.
you keep putting peanut butter and jelly in there, of course it's going to keep turning into garbage. But if you put real food in there, you have a lot more grace.
That is amazing advice, and I love, like, your experience backs it up wholeheartedly. I haven't quite put a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in my tank yet, but I'm going to be doing that for sure.
I put bread
Um,
in my I feed my flathead catfish bread. So
oh
that why it
gosh,
came to mind.
yeah, that, like, sure. That's I was telling somebody earlier today. If I was raising catfish, I just give them dog food.
Right.
Like,
Well, I take my dirty, nasty bread when it comes out of the grindle worm or the white worm cultures, and they're like full of worms and mites and bleh. And so day one, I'll put the bread in the tank and I'll shake it around. And so sometimes pieces of bread will fall off, but by day two, it's nasty. And so I just dump the whole bread in there because the worms eat most of it. And so the
yeah,
catfish, they seem to be okay.
yeah, they'll eat the
But
rest of it.
that the tank gets nasty. If I do that more than once a week, I have to do more water changes because I can tell that it's getting cloudy. Right? You got to be one with your
Yeah.
tank.
One with the tank. I love it. All right, Sarah. Well, anything else? I know we could talk for hours because
Right, I was
we
going to say
do.
I've already talked for a whole hour. So,
I know.
any questions? I don't know if
Nothing
anyone's
else.
still listening to us.
There's been a lot of people in and out. I've put questions up as I got them. Aquarium Fantasy asked, how many tanks do you have?
It says, what killifish need in order to help them as an effort to make them available as mass? Okay, so the other reason I love killifish is that for the most part, they're not really capable to be commercially bred because most, except for annual killifish, which are not really something that we want to sell in fish stores, right? We don't want little Joe Bob going home with a fish who has a 3-month lifespan because by the time they get to the fish store, they don't have that much time left. So we don't necessarily want annuals in fish stores, but we do want Gardnerine, and we do want Blue Gularis. And oh gosh, oh yeah. So the reason why they're not in fish stores is because they're just like people. They like to eat and they like to screw around. So you feed them and then you wait and then there's eggs. And then you feed them and then you wait and then there's eggs. But those eggs are going to get eaten if they're not eating worms, they're eating eggs. And so you have to constantly go in there every single day and pull that mop and check that mop for eggs. And then you have to care for those eggs. And so, like, every baby that I hatch is represents 14 days of work. And that's every 2 days checking them. So it represents 7 days of work for one baby. And when the gardener eye sells for $10 a pair, it makes it really hard to check that mop every single day. Um, and for that reason, they're not commercially viable because why would I get 10 eggs a day from one species of fish when I can get 10,000 neon tetras in a vat with less effort? And so for the most part, and that's why I love killifish, because I know that no matter what I do, the cheapest fish, Gardner Eye Gold, is going to sell for $10 a pair. And that's pretty good because you don't go and sell 2 neon tetras for $10, right? So every fish I breed is money, and it's promised money because there's always more demand than there is killifish. So you want to make money, raise killifish. But just know that there's a bunch of grumpy old men who think that they're worth $10 a pair, when in truth, when we look at the rest of the market and the rest of the industry, they're worth 50.
Yep.
And you stand out there with your fish and you say, give me $50, they will. I sell my fish at $50 a pair. But I also have a full-time job and a whole life. So I can't, even with my best efforts, I can pay for all this travel I do, but that's just about it.
That's amazing. I love everything about this. I'm going to make a commitment here that I'm going to get some killifish from you. I'm going to try to keep them. It's going to be great. And if I have any questions, I'm probably going to post them all in the new AquaFindr forum. We'll just do a quick plug for that guy. This is brand new, launched yesterday. So jump in there. It works with your AquaFindr login. So those of you that are listening that already have a login, it all works there. This is supposed to be a open, welcoming community where you can learn things. I've preceded a few things in there, and I'm also having some angelfish trouble. So if you jump in there and see my angelfish post, that's where that came from. But yeah, just a quick hit on that. Sarah, I appreciate your time and your friendship and your killifish and the passion that you bring to the hobby and to our local aquarium society. It's very much appreciated. Thank you for spending time with us.
No problem. Thank you for having me. Anytime.
All right, everybody, go get your arms wet. Go siphon the water. I forget what I said in the intro. Siphoning something. Go get some killifish. Go find them.
Buy Critter Keeper and call me. You get a free pair of killifish for joining the American Killifish Association.
That's true.
And they're there. Look, right there. That's your free killifish if you join the AKA.
I found this in my room.
And they're in there.
And it's just kind of hanging. I haven't put it on my laptop yet because I wasn't ready to commit. But I am now. I'm going to put it on my laptop. I'll get some from you. This is going to be fun.
I think I have 60 to 75 tanks if you don't count all the random things that I throw water in and put outside.
Yeah, it's hard to define
then it's over 100.
When it's really anything that holds water.
Right. Yeah, someone asked how many tanks I have. I think in my fish room, it's like 60 to 75. And then when you add all the other things that I have put water and fish in, it's closer to 100.
My numbers are way more rookie than that. All right, everyone, we're signing off.